Most people believe they would never lose their judgment over an emotional connection. They assume they would see the risks clearly. But psychology shows that when an affair begins forming, the mind often changes the way it evaluates reality. This shift rarely happens suddenly. It develops slowly through emotional reinforcement, attention, and the brain's natural response to reward. What once seemed obvious can start to feel complicated. Understanding how emotional affairs hijack emotional judgment reveals something deeper about human behavior. It shows how powerful emotional validation and novelty can reshape the way people interpret their own choices. At the beginning, most emotional affairs do not feel like affairs at all. They often start as conversations that feel unusually engaging. Someone listens closely. Someone responds with curiosity. The interaction feels easy and natural. The brain quickly recognizes these interactions as rewarding. When someone makes us feel understood, dopamine levels increase. This chemical signal tells the brain that the experience is valuable and worth repeating. Over time, the mind begins associating that person with emotional relief. After a stressful day or a difficult moment, the brain starts seeking that same source of comfort again. This is where emotional judgment begins to shift. Instead of evaluating the situation from a distance, the brain is now involved in the experience. Emotional reward makes the connection feel meaningful rather than questionable. Now, consider something important. When people feel emotionally energized by a connection, they often start explaining it to themselves in ways that make it seem harmless. The mind might say it's just friendship, just conversation, just someone who understands things a little better. These explanations are not always intentional. They are the brain's way of protecting a rewarding experience. Psychologists sometimes refer to this process as cognitive reframing. When a behavior conflicts with someone's values, the mind adjusts the interpretation of that behavior to reduce discomfort. In other words, the brain changes the story. Instead of asking whether the connection is appropriate, the mind asks a different question. It asks whether the interaction feels meaningful or emotionally important. Once that shift occurs, judgment becomes less objective. Another psychological force begins working quietly in the background. It's called selective attention. When emotional attachment grows, the brain naturally focuses on information that supports the connection and ignores information that challenges it. Positive moments become vivid and memorable. Concerns or risks feel distant and less urgent. For example, a short conversation that feels deeply engaging can stay in someone's mind all day. Meanwhile, the practical consequences of the relationship barely enter conscious thought. Let me ask you something worth reflecting on. Have you ever noticed how a single meaningful interaction can dominate your thoughts, even when you know you should focus on something else? This is the brain prioritizing emotional reward. Another reason emotional judgment becomes distorted is novelty. Human brains are highly responsive to new experiences. Novel interactions activate the brain's reward system more strongly than familiar routines. In long-term relationships, stability and predictability naturally develop. That stability creates trust and security, but it can feel less stimulating compared to a new emotional connection. When someone encounters a person who brings novelty, curiosity, and focused attention, the emotional intensity can feel powerful. But here's the surprising insight. The intensity isn't just about the other person. It's about the contrast between novelty and routine. The brain interprets that contrast as excitement. Over time, this excitement begins influencing decision-making. Emotional moments start to carry more weight than rational evaluation. This is how judgment slowly becomes hijacked. People don't suddenly forget their values. Instead, the emotional significance of the connection becomes larger than the concerns surrounding it. Another important factor is secrecy. When a connection must remain hidden or undefined, the brain often interprets that secrecy as emotional significance. The hidden nature of the interaction can make it feel more special or intense. Psychologically, forbidden or restricted experiences can increase emotional focus. Anticipation grows stronger. Small interactions begin to feel unusually meaningful. A brief message or conversation can carry emotional impact far beyond what it objectively deserves. Now imagine how this affects perception. When someone feels that emotional intensity, their brain begins building a narrative around the connection. They may believe the relationship is uniquely meaningful or unusually rare, but much of that feeling comes from the brain's response to secrecy, novelty, and emotional validation. Another pattern appears during this stage. People begin compartmentalizing their emotional world. One part of life contains responsibilities and established relationships. Another part contains the excitement and emotional stimulation of the new connection. Because these worlds rarely overlap, the brain avoids confronting the conflict between them. Compartmentalization allows emotional experiences to exist without immediate judgment. But eventually, the psychological tension grows. The mind starts justifying behaviors that once felt unacceptable. It reframes the connection as something necessary, meaningful, or even inevitable. Let me pause here with another question. If someone repeatedly experiences emotional reward from a relationship, how easy is it for the brain to suddenly treat that connection as a mistake? Usually, it's not easy at all. This is why affairs can become deeply confusing for the people involved. From the outside, the risks may seem obvious, but from inside the emotional experience, the connection feels real and important. Judgment becomes filtered through emotion. Understanding this process doesn't excuse harmful choices, but it explains why intelligent and thoughtful people can sometimes behave in ways that surprise even themselves. Human decision-making is not purely rational. It's deeply influenced by emotional reward systems that evolved long before modern social structures. When those reward systems become strongly attached to a person or interaction, they can quietly reshape perception. However, awareness changes everything. When people recognize how emotional validation, novelty, secrecy, and attention influence their thinking, they regain the ability to step back and evaluate their choices more clearly. Instead of interpreting emotional intensity as proof of something meaningful, they can see it as a signal from the brain's reward system. That shift in awareness restores emotional judgment. The deeper lesson here is not only about affairs, it's about understanding how human psychology responds to attention, connection, and emotional stimulation. All relationships are shaped by these forces. When people learn to recognize them, they gain a clearer understanding of their own reactions, their desires, and the choices they make during emotionally charged moments. Because the strongest emotions in life are not always the most reliable guides. Sometimes they're simply signals from a brain responding to novelty, validation, and attention. And recognizing that difference can change the way someone sees their relationships entirely. If these insights made you think differently about how emotional connections influence judgment, share your perspective in the comments. Many people discover that understanding the psychology behind relationships reveals patterns they had never noticed before. And if exploring the deeper dynamics of human behavior interests you, consider subscribing to continue learning about the hidden forces that shape attraction, decisions, and emotional connection.